Hello and welcome to this module where we start looking at how we can set up our inventory management system. And we are going to start looking at the physical environment, the physical infrastructure that needs to be put in place. In setting up an inventory management system, some or all of the following aspects need to be defined. Firstly, you have got stores facilities, and then those stores facilities need to be subdivided into subsections or bin locations, and then if need be, you can define your manufacturing facilities. So when we talk of stores facilities, we are talking of the physical places or physical locations where you actually keep stock or where stock is held. So if you have got only one stores facility, then you are having a single store system. But if you've got more than one store facility, then you are having a multi-store system. And in a multi-store system, you need to define the relationships between those different stores. So if you've got more than one store, it means that an item can be stored at one or more of those stores. So for a single item, you will then be having a balance for that item at each individual store. Then you also have the company balance or the overall balance for that item throughout the whole organization. Each store may have different methods for handling stock, and the different aspects that can be particular to each store can include the replenishment method. So because of the different sizes of the stores, they cannot all have the same reorder level, because in the first place they've got different maximum stock holdings per item. So the main store will have a large maximum quantity because it receives stock on behalf of all the other stores, whereas a sub-store in a remote area will need a very low maximum level because it only needs quantities to satisfy that particular location only. Each store can also have different picking rules. So when you're talking of picking rules, we are saying how do you select which items to pick from stores. So you can either pick the newest first, which would call last in, first out. So in other words, the one that you received last, the newest, would be the one in the very front of the shelf. So you're picking the newest first. Or you could pick the oldest first, which is first in and first out. Or you could say, I pick from the bin with the lowest bin balance. So in other words, if you've got different locations that hold the same item, so you look for the one that has got the minimum bin balance, you pick from there. So the effect of that method is to ensure that you don't pick from all the bins until all of them are almost empty, but you pick from a bin until it is empty, then you go to the next bin also until it is empty. You could also have a picking method that is to do with serial numbers. So if you are dealing with items that are serialized, your first in first out would be picking first the item with the lowest serial number, and last in first out would be picking the item with the highest serial number. Each store can also have its own unique stock check or stock take calendar, meaning that each sub-store can decide when to conduct stock take. And the different stores will also have different working calendars depending on what is the actual business happening at that particular location. In some locations, there are a basic office setup that work from Monday to Friday. In other locations, they are having workshops or factories where things are being made, so their working calendar can be beyond the Friday, and probably they work Saturdays and Sundays, even overtime. So you need that ability to specify a customized working calendar for each physical store's facility. When we are dealing with a multi-store facility, we need to understand how transactions affect stock at different levels in the organization. So the chart that we are having on the screen now is representing a multi-store environment where you have got a main store and then 3 sub-stores. So we have established a relationship between the main store and suppliers. So in other words, all the stock for the organization is being acquired through the main store. That is why purchase orders are coming from main store to supplier, and deliveries are made from the suppliers to the main store. Then once main store has the stock, they can then make internal transfers to the sub-stores. So you can see that we have represented a two-directional motion between all the stores, because it is possible for stock transfers to happen either way. Stock can be moved from one location to the next, or vice versa. When you're managing your stock properly, before you buy from external suppliers, you need to check stock balances at the different sub-stores, just in case you have got a particular sub-store that is holding stock which has been sitting there idle for a long time. So instead of buying new stock from the suppliers, you simply do an internal transfer. So this is why it is important to understand the effect of the different transactions on the stock balance for the individual store, as well as the overall company balance. So let's take, for example, a simple stock item. If we have got brooms in our stores, this normal broom for sweeping, so if we've got 10 brooms overall in the company, main store could be having 3 or 4 brooms, then you've got 2 brooms at each of these stores. So when we ask for a report for the individual store, each store will report a balance of 4 at main store and 2 at each one of these sub-stores. But when we now ask for the overall report for the company, the balance for the broom will be 10. So when we transact that broom, either in terms of internal stock transactions or in terms of sales or issues, the effect of the transaction on the balance depends on what type of transaction it is. So we are going to look next at the different transactions and how they affect our stock balance at the various stores, as well as the overall stock balance for the company. So when we talk of the company balance, we are saying it is the total amount of a particular item that is held at all the stores in the company. So the example of the broom that we gave, the 10 was the company balance, but the store balance is now the total amount for a particular store. So you have to look at the balance of that item at that specific store, then it gives you the store balance. So this table here, it shows us the effect of various transactions on the company balance and on the store balance. So if we purchase some new stock from suppliers, we are saying it increases the company balance by the transaction quantity, in other words, the amount that we have received, and it also increases the balance at the main store, because the main store is the one that is receiving. So for example, if we have just received 20 new brooms from the supplier, the balance at main store will now be whatever was there plus the 20. Further, the overall company balance will now be the total that we had for all the stores plus that 20 that we received. So in other words, a purchase receipt will increase the balance at the main store which is receiving. It also increases the total balance for the whole company. When we now transfer the brooms from main store to the different branches, the total company balance, it remains unchanged because all the brooms are still within the company. But the one store reduces and the other store increases. So in other words, the store that is issuing or that is transferring out, it reduces its balance by the amount of the transaction, and the store that is receiving increases its balance by the same amount. So if we take our brooms, for example, we decide to move 5 brooms from main store to sub-store A. We subtract the 5 from main store and we add the 5 to sub-store A. But the overall company balance remains the same. We are simply moving the stock internally. It is not going out of the company. Then next, when we sell or issue out stock, the company balance decreases by the transaction quantity, and the issuing store also decreases by the same quantity. This is because when we sell or issue out the stock, we are now taking the stock out of the store's system. It's no longer part of our balance. So the moment we issue out stock at whichever sub-store, that particular store which is issuing, it loses the 5 that have been issued out, and the customer gains the 5. And also the overall company balance reduces by the same amount, because that stock is no longer moving inside the company. It has now been taken out of the company. Then if we receive stock, say from the factory, remember the factory, it transforms raw materials into finished goods. So these finished goods are new to the company. They were not there before, they've just been made. So they are new to the store's system. So the receiving store increases by the amount of finished goods that have been received. Also, the overall company balance also increases by the same amount. So any transaction that introduces stock from outside the system, it will add to both the overall company balance as well as the individual store balance. You might think, is that not a duplication? No, because what happens is, first we just introduce that 5 new items to main store. So because main store has now increased by 5, therefore it means the total, when you now add main store to sub-store A, B and C, its new balance will now make the overall company balance to also increase by the same transaction amount. And now when we scrap spoiled items, we are taking those items out of the company. So any scrapped items, they reduce the balance at the store that is written them off. It also reduces the overall company balance. So this is very important to understand when you are creating your system and you want to maintain accurate stock records, both for the individual stores as well as the overall company balances. So far, we've looked at the physical store locations. Let us now look at the organization of an individual store. When we talk of bin control, we are talking of creating partitions within a particular store or a warehouse. So these are physical partitions that we create, and they can take the form of shelves, boxes, or it could even be areas that we mark on the floor with painted lines, depending on the type of items that we are keeping. So each location will have a unique bin identity, which is the bin number that uniquely identifies the location within a store. So that helps the person working in stores to find where the items are. Even when we are doing stock take, the bin locations are useful because we write on the action list these particular items are found in bin number A1. So the person doesn't have to go throughout the whole stores looking for a particular item. So a bin may be assigned a picking sequence number, defining a preferred order for picking. So when we talk of picking sequence, we are referring to a case where there is more than one bin location that holds the same item. Say, for example, you have got 3 or 4 boxes that have got the same item. So you can put a picking sequence number on each box, maybe 1, 2, 3, and you say you always start with the lowest sequence. That ensures that you finish all the items in one box before you go to the next box. You can also define one or more storage types for each bin location, and items that have got that storage type can be stored there. The storage type is important because certain items cannot be held in a box. They can only be held on a freestanding shelf. Other items are too big and heavy to be put on a shelf. They can only stand on the floor. So the storage type specifies what type of bin location you are dealing with. A bin can also be defined as to whether it holds single items or multiple items at the same time. So there are certain items where you can only keep one in a location. Let's talk of the big items that we were referring to. You can have a shelf that can probably keep only one computer or one computer screen. And then you have a box which can keep 500 nuts and bolts. So for each bin location, you identify whether it's a single item or it's a multiple item bin location. The next physical facility we need to define are the manufacturing facilities. If we are having items that are being made by our organization, then we need to also create those facilities where those products are being made, so that we create a relationship between the items and the manufacturing facility at which those items are made. So we can describe how the items are made within the factory. And if an item can be made at several manufacturing facilities simultaneously, we then need to nominate one of those facilities as the prime or the primary facility, meaning that when we are assigning a manufacturing facility, that primary facility always gets the priority. Unless it is occupied, then we can allocate to the other facilities. So it is important that we set up every individual manufacturing facility within our system. So for the manufacturing facilities, we can now look at the different aspects which can be defined. We talked earlier on of lead time in terms of the time that it takes from ordering an item until we receive it from the supplier. But we also have lead time when it comes to manufacturing as well. So in a manufacturing facility, lead time would be the notional time that it takes to make an item at this facility if all its components are available. So there are different lead times for manufacturing facilities. The first one we just defined now assumes that all the components are available. But you also have another type of lead time that also includes the ordering of materials. So in other words, we can assume we are starting with no raw materials. How long does it take from ordering the materials, receiving them, until we finish manufacturing the end product? We can also define a batch rule for the manufacturing facility. So the batch rule is the method that we use for batching items. You can either have a fixed batch size to say whenever we are working in this factory, we must always manufacture 10 garments at a time. Whenever we start production, we must always have an output of so much. Such limitations could be placed by the equipment that you are using. Then you can also have another batching method where you simply say we are flexible and the batch that we use will be equal to the total orders. In other words, we only make according to the orders that we have received. A manufacturing facility will also define its scrap percentage. So the scrap percentage will be the percentage of scrap or wastage that is expected on each order. So there is no factory that is 100% perfect. For every 100 items, you will always find one or two that are defective. It could be 1 in 1,000, it could be 1 in 5,000. You will know from your history data that this particular facility has got a 0.1% scrap, or another facility has 1% scrap or 5% scrap, but that is normally obtained from historical data. Then when you are manufacturing a specific item in a factory, there is what we call a planning route that you can define for that item. This is because a factory usually has different workstations. Let's take, for example, a factory that is having a place where you do cutting, another place you are doing drilling of holes, another place you are doing welding. So that factory can have 20 different workstations, but the product that you want to make that particular day only needs to be cut, to be drilled, and to be welded. So you do not need to take that product through all the workstations. You simply create a route, a manufacturing route for that particular item, to say it starts at the cutting, which is workstation 1, then from there it jumps to workstation 5, which is for drilling. From there it jumps to workstation 20, which is for welding. So this is the route that we create for production planning, and it's specific to that manufacturing facility. So the planning route is also associated with the costing route. We are no longer considering the route in terms of what must be done there. We are now considering the route in terms of what does it cost to work at that particular workstation. So there are costs that will be assigned to the use of a particular machine, the use of a particular artisan who operates that machine. So when we have got a planning route, then we calculate the costs at each work center. Then we come up with an estimate of the production cost for that particular item. So now we've looked at the physical setup of the store's environment, as well as the manufacturing environment that can work hand in hand with the stores. Next, we are going to be looking at stock accounts, which represent the logical disposition of stock. So we'll see you in the next module.